This happened to me back sometime around 2016. I was working as a compliance inspector. I was working for a company that was contracted by the state to audit assisted living facilities. Basically, just checking they were following guidelines and protocols strictly. Safety, proper vetting of staff, making sure that the staff were healthy as possible, taking steps to prevent elder abuse and stuff like that. I would audit things like nursing homes, private care houses, and group homes. Most of these places were exactly like you would expect to find them. They were underfunded at best and struggling to even keep the lights on. Maintenance work was usually at a minimal because of costs, which meant plumbing and other things were a wreck. They were one slight accident away from having no power and being shut down. The state doesn't care. They never offer any kind of increased budget or assistance to these places. In fact, the budgeting issues have only gotten worse in recent years due to cuts. These people aren't even seen as human at their age, and with the cognitive difficulties that they have, and so they are expendable by the state. Why waste money making old people comfortable if they're just gonna die, right? That is how they think. Anyway, these places were also understaffed too, so the residents were often not getting the right kind of care. There is one specific place that sticks out in my mind from my time working this job. It sticks out from the rest because it wasn't just a typical case of abuse or neglect. This was a place out in Tacoma. I won't give the name, not that it would really matter now anyway. For now, I will refer to it as Rainwood Assisted Living, or just Rainwood for short. Like I said, not the real name of the place, but I'm sure that some of you can read between the lines. It was tucked behind a tree line down a private gravel road. Most of these places are right smack dab in the center of places because it provides better access to transport and other facilities. This one was an exception to that rule, being way further out near the edge of the city. Kind of a bitch to get to, if I'm telling the truth. It was kind of a mid-sized facility that looked more like some kind of residential lodge rather than anything else. Certainly did not look like any kind of medical center or care home. Might have been a cozy looking place if not for the forest surrounding it on all sides. Made me feel a little creeped out, if I'm honest. Could not see anything through the trees, and made the place feel more isolated than it actually was. It looked out of place, to tell you the truth, like someone spawned the place in just in a random section of trees. To tell the truth, this place was not originally on my list of places to stop by. It was a last-minute thing on the docket. It was only put on there because they had not submitted their quarterly self-reporting logs. What I mean by that is that they had not submitted any incident reports or medication audits, not even any staff turnover records. I mean, come on. Place like this with the elderly, you're gonna have accidents. People are gonna hurt themselves, even in the most secure and well-maintained facilities. It is statistically impossible for it not to happen. Place was ghost for about a total of 6 months, which I guess is the threshold for the government actually giving a fuck. If they had kept ticking along as usual, the place would have stayed unnoticed out here. It was odd the moment I pulled in. No vehicles, nothing parked up, no kind of parking spaces set up at all. Dead quiet all around too. For being so close to trees and nature, you'd think that you would hear some nature sounds like wind in the trees or birds singing. Apparently not. You could not even hear the traffic off in the distance from here. Place looked fairly standard when I walked in. Not pristine, but better than most places I had seen. Way better actually. Looked like this place might have actually had funding. Receptionist greeted me. She was older, maybe 50s or so. Seemed to have a real stick in her craw when I walked in. She feigned politeness, but you could tell she did not want to deal with me. Not in an exhaustion way though. She didn't look tired or done with the job, just done with me. I gave her the standard spiel, and she told me to wait. She was very specific with this, insistent I did not move from the spot. Safe to say alarm bells were going off in my head straight away. Still, I did not want to escalate things so quickly. If something weird was going on, I would find it quite quickly. It's not like they could just turn me away either. Must have stood there for getting on 20 minutes. I was getting kinda antsy. Anyway, Some guy in a button-down and a sweater vest steps out. Tells me his name is Dr. Vel or some bullshit like that. Pretty sure that was not his real practicing name. He said that he was the facility director and would personally accompany me and walk me through everything. Not unusual for people to try and be helpful, but it was a little annoying. I didn't need some asshole sticking under my boot like gum trying to slow me down. He did not seem to be intentionally trying to slow me down at the very least. He seemed competent enough, perhaps a little too formal though. He recited stats to me from memory about the facility before I even looked through the documents. It was clearly rehearsed. No one just knows all of this stuff off by heart. I had heard enough and started the walkthrough proper. Everything seemed to be in place. Medcarts were locked. All documentation seemed to be in place and was archived neatly. I asked to speak with some of the residents and check on them, and he seemed very hesitant. The receptionist from earlier very hastily made her way upstairs, presumably to where the residents were. He tried to delay me and make excuses, but I was insistent that he would not pass without talking to the residents and checking on their health. Tried to tell me it was quiet time and that they were all fast asleep. It was fucking 1 p.m. Anyway, he relented and led me upstairs. The receptionist passed us by as we walked down the corridor, and she flashed a nervous look towards the doctor. My eyes could have been deceiving me, but it looked like she had made some sort of a hand signal. Nothing complicated, just a point and another movement. He led me to the first door on my left. Said I was lucky that the guy in there did not sleep much and was willing to see me. There was a nameplate on the door when we walked in, something like George Donnelly. When I walked in, the guy was sitting up in his bed. He looked barely conscious, if I'm honest. He was awake, barely. By that, I mean his eyes were open. He didn't really look all there though. He was dressed, from what I can tell. Had a plain white t-shirt on, but it looked quite ragged and old. He did not respond to me when I started talking to him. Not when I waved, and not to my voice. I leaned down and spoke to him directly, but his eyes did not track me. There were lots of medical tools by the sides of the bed on one of those metal tables that you can wheel away. Medical tools I had not seen before. I tried getting the man's attention again, even clicking my fingers. His lips moved like he was trying to speak, but he could not form the words. He just kind of moved in a circle with his body while sitting, like a drunk person does, because they have no balance. I asked the doctor what was wrong with him. He told me that most of the residents had advanced degenerative conditions and that it was all in the medical files. Told me that Mr. Connolly had dementia as well, and that his son dumped him here because he could not cope. I asked if I could see another resident, but the doctor insisted that I had seen quite enough. He told me I would find the same situation with the rest of the residents too. I reviewed the medication logs back at the front desk. The receptionist handed them over to me. They were all printed and tabbed. I started scanning dates. Every single day had the same dosage entries, same handwriting, same timestamps, 22 entries per day, no variation at all. I checked staffing schedules next. No one had taken a sick day in months. There were no overnight staff on the books, so I assumed the doctor took the lead in those hours. Only 3 names total were listed for the entire facility rotation. That's not legal, even with light resident loads. I stepped outside to call my supervisor. I had no signal from this shitty place. When I walked back towards my car, I noticed that there was another vehicle parked up now. It was a large van, the kind of stereotypical one that you would see delivery drivers use, except it was all in black. There were 2 men sitting in the front, but they were showing no signs of moving or getting out. Something just seemed so sketchy. Since I could not get a hold of my supervisor, I wanted to do one last check. I made my way back in, and the receptionist tried to stop me. She told me that the doctor would be furious, but I pushed past her. Told her I see more residents, or the facility gets shut down for neglect. I went back to the door I saw before. It was shut now, but I could see through the little glass pane. The man was now restrained to the bed, literally tied up with metal restraints. He had a gag in his mouth now too. I went and looked in the other rooms and was met with the same sight in all of them. I ripped the door open and took the gag from Mr. Connolly's mouth. He seemed a little more lucid now, but still just barely. I noticed that there was an empty syringe on the metal table beside him. The second I took the gag off him, he started speaking. He was groaning in agony and was telling me, "Please, please, I'm in pain. I have pain in my ribs. Please, it's burning. It's burning my shoulder. Please make it stop." I asked what happened, what they did to him, but I could not get him to stop panicking. He started almost screaming now. "I want my son. I don't remember his name, but I need my son. He wouldn't leave me here. Please get me my son." I felt horrible. My heart was wrenching. I noticed a locked door in the corner of the room I did not notice the first time. It looked like a small broom closet, but it had a padlock, and I had no way to open it. I didn't have time anyway. 2 men had burst through the door, all dressed in black, and what looked almost like riot gear, like they were a fucking SWAT team. They were armed too. One ran to the resident and put his gag back in, and the other held me at gunpoint and told me to get down on my knees. I had no choice but to comply. They handcuffed me and roughed me up. My face was a mess by the time they were done. They dragged me back to the front desk, and the doctor told me I was a fool for looking. They took off my handcuffs and threw me out the front. I told them I would go to the police. In retrospect, this is the worst thing I could have said, and in all honesty, should have gotten me killed. But I will get to why it probably didn't. All the doctor said was, "That won't be necessary." Then they shut the door on me. Called my boss the second I got signal. I told him everything. He told me he was contacting the police and that they would be over there as soon as possible. I was questioned, of course, and had to give evidence. I told them the exact same as I told it here. Here is the kicker though. They told me that the place was gutted when they got there. Any medical tools were taken. There were no signs of any residents at all. They found traces of blood, but they could not match it to anyone in the system. They bust down the closet that was in there, but that was picked clean too. I don't know why they bothered locking it back up. That is all the police were really willing to tell me. My company obviously had to do its due diligence, as these were massive accusations and violations. Something like this was a nightmare by all accounts. The boss knows me. We are not close, but we are as close as a boss and a worker can be. He told me that the police in the company had cross-referenced and checked all the names and details that I had given about the staff. Turns out, none of the names were the same as the last check. Sure, staff quit and move on, but this was a complete employee overhaul. They had lost employees, the number was fewer, but not a single one was the same. They obviously could not find any kind of practicing doctor with the name I gave, so his credentials were faked. There was one more thing though. The last inspection must have been around 12 to 14 months ago. It's meant to be routine, but delays can happen. We're not exactly brimming with staff ourselves. Well, around 12 months ago, the facility applied for extra funding, said that they needed it desperately, or they would fail to meet standards. It obviously was not approved, so very promptly, they filed all of the necessary paperwork for the facility to be shut down. It was meant to be slowly transitioned out, and for the residents to be relocated, or for the government to find other staff. In the midst of all of the chaos, and because facilities like this generally aren't cared about very much, it must have all just slipped through the cracks. That is why the place had been ghost for 6 months. It was supposed to have shut down, and the government taken over. Which begs the question, who the fuck was running that place? Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Nothing really ever happened to me, but I got a story from a friend from years ago when he was a teen. It goes, party with friends at another guy's house. don't know this guy personally. My friend was/still is easily gullible. He really believes in paranormal shit, but he was/still is also really easily scared. Apparently, all the people at the party were like that too. New friend's house is just recently bought. Old house, which is deemed infested. This guy said nothing big really happened in the few weeks his family lived there, but some weird minor things actually happened. Like, there is this sloping corridor, which, if you let a ball roll, it goes up the slope instead of down. My friend confirmed this. During the night, they tell each other scary stories, just because it seems it's not enough for these scaredy cats to stay in an apparently infested house. They get even more scared. Then they decide to just scare this random girlfriend, just because they can. One guy, not my friend, nor the house's host, goes into this unused room, which apparently they previously told each other stories about being the real trouble in the house. Infestation trouble, I mean. Like it's the fulcrum of the whole infestation in the house. He should have stayed there, in the dark, and later, the others should have just used an excuse and sent the girl, the victim, in that room alone, and the guy would have scared the crap out of her. The guy who went there first, the one who later had to scare her, accepted. Because apparently, it was the only person there who didn't believe all this infested crap, and wasn't already shitting himself after their round of scary storytelling. Basically, it was the only brave guy there, hence why he accepted immediately to stay there alone in the darkness for a while. Friend also confirmed this guy was a real deal, no crap, I'm cool kind of guy, so it wasn't like he was just a chicken like him or the others. So they do all that. Guy goes hiding, tells others he's going to the bathroom. A few minutes later, they tell this girl to go get some stuff from the scary room. She accepted, because some other girls agreed to go with her. But they basically pushed her into the dark room and closed the door. They waited for the guy scaring her screaming, maybe even crying, then laughing all away as just a joke. A few seconds pass, nothing happens. A few moments later, girl calls them concerned, not scared yet, saying something was wrong with the guy. They were all outside the door waiting to laugh, so when they heard her, they enter the room altogether to see what was wrong. There is no light inside the room, so they keep the door open so light from the corridor, which was the actual corridor with a slope, can enter the room so that they can see. They all enter, and they see the guy friend crying on the ground, and the girl patting his back and head, trying to calm him. They ask what was happening. She said after they pushed her in, she was scared at first, but then heard some quiet crying and recognized it being her friend, the guy who was waiting there to scare her. He did not say anything, just continued crying, so she went there to ask him what was wrong, and then called the others inside. Guy was still crying. Now he looks at them and my friend, which was one of the last to enter the room. Told me when this guy looked at them, he was terrified, was basically a total different guy from the usual super cool guy. He then mumbled something about the door, so the host, the last one who entered the room, goes and closes the door, then comes back to the others. Okay. Now when he told me this, my friend was really fucking scared. He said that the door was an old door, smaller than usual, so that there was a few inches of space underneath the door, so that light could pour in. My friend told me that there was nobody at the house except for them. The host's parents were away for the weekend. The host is an only son, so nobody else got keys for the house, and all the people inside the house that night were currently all inside the room. They even checked and counted/called each other. They were all there. But there was a shadow just outside the door, like a person was right outside it, standing there. Friend said to me that when he and the others realized it, when they saw that, they all felt the same kind of feeling. That is, pure terror, pure hopelessness, like something really bad was out there, and they were nothing but mice in a trap. He said he never felt a worse feeling in his entire life, and later confirmed with all the others that they all felt that too. He later told me that no shit, they stayed there without moving, all embracing each other scared shitless for hours until the morning after. And not just until the dawn, but until the sun was well high and the room was fully illuminated. There were wooden blinds outside the window, but when they deemed there was enough light inside, they moved to open them and let even more light in. He told me they realized how lucky they were that this happened in full summer. It was like June or July, so there was a lot of light in the morning. Obviously, when they finally opened the door, there was nothing there, and told me also that the shadow of the being behind the door actually disappeared little by little before dawn even came. But none of them dared to move even after that. They all still felt in danger, like they were threatened. Hence why they all moved only a few hours later, when the sun was well high. And even then, he said it took a lot of courage for them to do just that. Open the windows, and then open the blinds behind them. Now, I am rather skeptical, and never believed in any of this sort of crap. But when my friend told me all this shit that happened to me years before, he told me this last summer. It happened about 3 to 4 years before that. I was shaken a little, because he was still pretty scared about it, even after all that time went by. He also thought it was a weird and fucked up experience, because after they talked about it, he told me all his friends had the exact same thoughts as him about the whole matter. He also told me that it wasn't hard in the least to stay awake all night long until almost midday, that they were also scared, that they did not even feel a tiny bit of tiredness until they were all safe and far away from the house. The host implored his parents to sell the house immediately. The other friends basically let him live at turn at their houses for the remaining of that summer, and then he went to fucking live with his grandparents more than 100 miles away from there, and that he never put a foot in there, and that all his stuff was brought to him by his parents, which at first, they just deemed him just a bothersome fool. But then the following winter, they sold that house at a shitty price, the first offer they got, and went the fuck away after something apparently happened to them too. My friend does not know what happened with the host's parents, because even the host himself never knew what really happened. His parents never told him, but he also never told them what happened to him and his friends. Friend also told me that after they talked about it that day, immediately after they went out from the house, they never talked about that ever again, and never mentioned it to each other. They just talk about it like that night or that summer. I was a cop for 15 years. I mostly worked cases involving financial crimes. Early on, I transferred from homicide to the grand larceny division. I quickly realized the thing that I enjoyed most was how numbers don't lie. It didn't matter what suspects said in interviews, because I knew that one look at their accounts would tell me the truth. When I retired, I became a private detective. One day, a lawyer that I'd known from my police days called. He told me that an important client needed me. A massive multinational company suspected someone was messing with their cash flow. This stretched across every major country on the planet. Given my background, they figured I was the right man for the job. The pay was more than good enough that I did not disagree. The company's accounts were scattered across the globe. They were tangled in a maze of transfers, receipts, and invoices. I started poring over spreadsheets and bank statements, hunting anything that seemed out of place. After a few days, I found subtle inconsistencies. There were payments funneled to shell companies that did not seem to do anything at all. There were also amounts that did not match usual patterns, and transactions made at strange hours. To anyone else, these might look like clerical errors, but I knew better. Money was slipping away, and someone inside the company was making it happen. I cross-referenced records, tracked cash flows, and the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This was not accidental. Someone was siphoning funds and covering their tracks. The numbers gave me a trail, but I needed names. I set up interviews with key company players, starting with the CFO. Made sense to start with the guy whose job it was to keep the books clean. In his sleek office overlooking the city skyline, he greeted me with a handshake and a smile. I started light and professional, asking broad questions about finances. Then I zeroed in on one large overseas transfer that caught my eye. When I asked who signed off on it, he said he could not recall. He said it must have been someone in his department. That did not sit right with me. People in his position do not forget who approves 7-figure transfers. His vague answer left a bad taste in my mouth. Next, I interviewed a mid-level manager who handled international accounts. When I mentioned that transfer, he said the CFO was present at a meeting where it was discussed. That directly contradicted the CFO, who claimed he had not attended. The manager stuck to his story. Then I talked to a longtime assistant in that financial team. She was really nervous, but remembered the CFO signing off on something big and urgent around that time. The cracks were showing, and the case was heating up. After that last interview, I headed to my car about a block away. I switched on my tape recorder, which was a habit from my cop days, and started thinking out loud. The CFO's evasiveness, the assistant's nervous comment, the conflicting stories, all of this pointed to something big. Then, before I could finish, my driver's side window exploded. 4 shots rang out. The first tore through the dashboard. The second one grazed my left shoulder. The third shot punched into the passenger seat, just inches away from my ribs. Then the fourth one hit me square in the jaw, shattering bone and teeth. Blood flooded my mouth as shock pulled the world out of focus. I slumped in my seat, hands searching for something to hold on to, but darkness crept in before I could react further. I woke up in a hospital bed, every breath burning. My jaw was wired shut, and my face was swollen. The doctor told me the bullet had fractured my mandible in 2 places. They said it destroyed half my lower teeth and exited near my ear. Surgery had saved me, but recovery would be long and painful. Speaking was impossible now. I had to scribble notes to communicate with anyone. Detectives visited me. They told me that my car was a crime scene and that my tape recorder caught the attack on audio. They believed the shooter was an amateur, panicked and fumbling. There were no prints or any clear leads for them to follow. When I mentioned my suspicions about the CFO, they promised to look into it, but seemed skeptical. Corporate cases were always messy. Without solid evidence tying the hit to someone, arrests would be tough. I did not hold my breath for any results. Weeks in the hospital became a blur of pain and therapy. I was fed liquid meals through a straw. Physical therapy aimed to keep my jaw muscles from locking up. I had a therapist pushing me to stretch despite the agony. I felt trapped, silent, and broken. Nightmares haunted me. I dreamt about gunshots echoing, glass shattering, the taste of blood. I replayed the attack and saw the CFO's smug face haunting me. Paranoia set in. I feared snipers on rooftops looking to kill me. I demanded more sedatives, but nothing eased the tension. After nearly 2 months, I was finally discharged. I moved to a new town under a fake name, sold my office lease, and took a low-risk infidelity cases. I avoided anything that smelled like corporate greed. My jaw clicks when I eat, my smile is crooked, and my speech is forever altered. But I survived. The detectives eventually transferred the case. I was not surprised. No one ever identified the shooter or whoever hired him. This happened to me around last year sometime, so 2014. I was kinda tipsy. I was walking home from the station. It must have been around midnight at the time. This was out in the countryside, so there were very few houses, and there was next to no traffic at all. My wife is hanging out with friends in town, so I'm on my own. No one is back at home. I see a cat on the side of the road. Is the fucker dead? I check it out and poke it gently with my foot. It's dark, but I can see very clearly that it is dead. There is blood oozing out of its mouth. It's not breathing or moving or running away. It's not reacting to my touch at all. I decide to go home and grab a shovel to throw the cat in the bush nearby. If my wife came home and saw that, she would freak out, as she loves cats. I go home and search around my shed and find a pitchfork. That'll do. I just did not want to touch it with my bare hands. I walk back to the feline stiff, about 2 minutes away. What the actual fuck? That dead cat is fucking gone. It's now nowhere to be seen at all, but the pool of blood coming from it is still there. I look around and see a pair of tiny eyes staring at me in the dark, before they turn and whatever that was moves away into the woods, never to be seen again. My wife came home later, and she found me sitting in my bed, looking puzzled. I only told her the story a few days later, and she looked pretty upset. Neither of us has any idea what I saw moving into the bush. Could have been another cat, but what happened to the dead cat still bugs me.